hopefulness coming in for some, a lot of desperation for others. We've definitely reached a pivot point on the planet right now where the world we knew somehow dissolved and is morphing and coalescing into something new. Now, for those that are excited about this, well, there's potentiality here for great change and movement forward. But those who are stuck into the sadness and that sort of disempowered now are delivering the message to the other half of the planet that you're disempowered. And this is exactly what controllers want, is to keep the population split. Now, imagine if we all came together and said, we are all empowered now, and we are going to ride these changes through this magnetic field change on our planet, and we are going to use our minds and our bodies and our spirits to grow to the ultimate potentiality, at least in this magnetic field state that a human can attain. I don't think we would need very much overseership. I think almost every system on the planet would go by the wayside, but they're still trying to ram central bank digital currencies down our throats along with the digital IDs to access that. And remember, as we move through this next year, you're going to be going from using your credit cards and being approved for every much transaction that you do, bank withdrawal, ATM, to do not trust anything until you validate that you are who you say you are. Zero trust is what they call this. And this is actually moving in December or January 1st, 2025. We're moving to a zero trust world, which means every transaction will be denied until they can prove that you are you, or actually the burden's on you to prove you are you. That's the problem. So this is the world we're moving into, and I do appreciate you joining tonight. We are going to talk really about what matters so deeply to most people. It's just having enough food in the belly, knowing that the security situation around you is good, that you have a way to have a viable income, to at least have some money to go enjoy the nice things and the fun things in life, versus just working and paying your rent, paying your electricity, paying your water bill, and making sure you keep a roof over your head with no other money left at the end of the month. That's not life. That's slavery. And as we break through the chrysalis, for a better term, you notice a lot of things are changing. In terms of sky phenomenon too, the amount of meteors coming in, which is breaking bolides. And when I say that, they come in as a single bolide come through, but the girthiness and the large size causes them to break up into multiple dozens of pieces. Now, this is the fourth or fifth, sixth one that we've seen come through our atmosphere in the last 2 weeks. So, there's two things trending. The largeness to the size of the space debris coming in is larger, but the noticeability of it, even in daytime, of these large bolides breaking up and leaving trails of multiple pieces, is really catching the eye of a fair few people. And please remember, as we roll around in front of the sun here, coming up in April, and then right in front of the sun of 2025, we will probably see a lot more of these meteors based on the geometric pattern and where the planets sit in their orbits, gravitationally ripping everything into us. So, Ransom, that's a lot to cover tonight. I do appreciate you joining. And please remember, civilizationcycle.com. I sent out the show notes to everybody tonight from last week's episode. You got 8 bullet points there to start conversations with, do some of your own research, or just contemplate on the things that are in play in the world. We talked about this last episode. Things that are in play are moving because it's a celestial cycle. The timeline is a celestial cycle. So whatever is predicated, or the people behind that believe it, have the hidden knowledge and understand the cycle, they're on a timeline for the celestial mechanics, not on the earth itself in terms of 4 years of this, 8 years of that. The Chinese are like 100 years of that. We're on something very different. We're on a celestial cycle now that is here. It's inbound. It's noticeable. And the world's changing because of it. So we got all this in play. So how's the next year in our world gonna spin out? Ransom, floor is yours. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. Yeah, I think they're about to get really crazy. And I know a lot of people think that because the 4-year cycle happened, that it's all going to be different. Now, some things are going to be different, but I don't think as far as war and food problems are going to be different. Maybe for us in the U.S., we'll see how this whole tariff trade war works out, because that is what's going to happen. But I think it's a good thing because it's going to force Americans to start producing what really matters. It matters that you have what you need, and you can't have that if people don't make it. And if people don't make it, then you can't buy it. So you'll have to make it yourself. And I think it's going to take off. More farming, more people producing products. Um, if they really do roll back regulations, there may be a time where you get to enjoy things like raw milk or, buying food from your neighbor. I guess we're all going to see how that kind of pans out. I'm going to say right now it's looking like a 50-50 as far as a lot of good things are happening and a lot of the same old is coming around again. So I don't know how that's going to pan out for us, but I think worldwide is still going to be going through the tribulations. It's just, it might switch areas. And you remember a while back when I was proposing the idea of a new combat theater in North America, specifically along the border. And it looks like it looks like we're already having it, to be honest. Just the other day, there was a bunch of people shooting at the Border Patrol from across the border. They're not happy with the way things are going to turn out. And you may be seeing on the news in the next, I'm going to say 8 months, villages being destroyed with heavy equipment. And unfortunately, this is going to cause blowback because there's going to be collateral damage. And then we're going to have people all of a sudden that were more in our favor now looking at us more like a rival or enemy.
Yeah, that's not good for anybody when your social capital gets destroyed. And when I talk about social capital, it's the same if you have a brand or something. You have a perception in society of, okay, this person is like this, they're here to help this, they're not there to help that. But when your reputation basically is ruined because of policy changes or actions, Humpty Dumpty never really goes back together after that. But to keep it into perspective, America's social capital is probably at a negative, because anytime America comes to your doorstep or your shores, unless you're with them, there's going to be some serious damage. There's going to be politics that change, banking's going to change, and then somebody like Halliburton will come in and rebuild it for you. You're going to have to devalue your currency, and then that bill will be paid on to American contractors. It's kind of the way it's been working for, 50, 60 years now. So again, social capital is only built. Now, there's a lot of hopefulness because of, new administration coming in, and we'll see what this entails. Got the dogs in the room if you hear any noise, maybe a puppy cameo coming up here. But this is the thing to think about. It is at the moment a possibility in change. Now, again, nothing has morphed into a solid object yet. It is in the progression of doing so. Where we stand right now is only potentiality of possibilities of change. And again, 50% of the people hate that, 50% of the people love it. But it seems like there was a mandate given. Now, if you want to go back to Chinese lore, myth, and legend, here's something, because you mentioned food. And I was talking with Seth Holhouse, Man in America. I was on his show. And we were talking about China and the mandate from heaven for the emperor. Now, what does that mean? That means that at the time, people worshiped the emperor as actually a direct descendant from the gods. And again, we can go into where they came from or what, the precedent is of those that came from, space down and said, we control you now, people on the planet. Okay, that's going back several 100,000 years. But the mandate from heaven is the authority given to the emperor to rule over the people. But nature has some nasty surprises for that. On about a 400-year cycle, the grand solar minimum rolls in. They lose the ability to grow food on that area on the planet. They can't grow enough food. And then suddenly their authority from the heavens literally evaporates, because if you can't feed the people and you can't give them water and assure them safety, you have no right to rule over them. If you believe there's any right given to rule over another human being anyway, which I personally don't. But just as society said in today's workings, Like once that mandate was removed, the emperor could walk into a peasant's house and be like, oh, mandate from heaven's removed. Get out of my doorstep. You just cursed my house. I have to get somebody to come in and now cleanse my house. You filthy emperor. And they were allowed to, once the mandate from heaven was removed, the emperor was shunned. It collapsed. The dynasty collapsed. We're at the very same thing now. The mandate was given for a new set of rules to come in, a new governance structure. At least in America, that mandate was given. It needs to change. You need to come in and do something different. But I will say it's all revolving, I would say, around food. Because if we can't grow enough food, and food prices really need to come down, and farm financing is a big thing for me. If we have a financial collapse or really some difficulty with the economy, then the ability to finance our farmers to get the seed and the repair parts that they need for their farm equipment and the fuels and the laborers and all the things they need to get that 100,000 acre farm seeded in. I'd prefer if they didn't do it with GMO. But if there's a breakdown in that, we will definitely have some really difficulty with the food. And at that point, you can control the masses using food. Again, the whole world has just shifted as of last week, and it's just a potential kind of in the ether until it becomes something solid. But how many months might that take?
I don't know. I think we're gonna see some real changes in 6 months, like
Yeah,
worldwide.
months, not years. I'm saying months, not years, for sure.
And I was gonna point out, if you guys like the new setup, I've been working really hard over here. We've been doing all kinds of tech stuff, making graphics. So if you remember to buy us a coffee, we would really appreciate that. And the link is in all the description boxes, I think. Buy me a coffee, civilization
Buy me a
cycle.
coffee, civilization / civilization cycle.
But with that being said, I was going to point out this article right here because it kind of wrong one shows kind of what era we're in today. When will the last?
And remember, they call that the greatest generation. For those of you that don't know what they called that generation, they called it the greatest generation. If you're not old enough to know that term, it means it's been taken out of our cultural lexicon because they don't want you to know that there was a great generation like this.
Right. It not only that, I think that it's a point in history they've been waiting on. They pulled a lot of shenanigans, I'll just put it that way, in World War II, and we remapped the whole world. And all of the people that were out there freezing, starving, fighting, dying, well, they're all about to finally not be with us, unfortunately. And it kind of marks the turn of an era because right when they're disappearing, we're hearing conscription, draft, World War III. You know, the main voters, just to put it locally, that would be against this are about to disappear. Matter of fact, I think I have the last remaining World War II vet probably right next door to me, at least in this area. And it's really trippy that they're disappearing so fast. So there was only 70,000 alive up until about 2015. And now they're just disappearing. It's getting crazy.
Yeah, remember the shows. Now, you and I were growing up. Do you remember the show Hogan's Heroes?
Yeah.
Remember that show Combat?
Right.
Like it glorified that age of sacrificing for not only the men around you, but your girlfriend, your wife was back home in that country that you needed to defend because those nasty critters, the communists, were coming over, the fascists, the socialists, were coming over here to take over.
Right.
And those shows are no longer on TV. They're really difficult to find. And if you know those shows that I'm talking about, Ransom, what was another one that was in that era of really driving the point home, even into the 70s, that we fought that war for a reason. And don't ever forget and don't let that creep in here.
All growing up, that's all I've ever heard about. That was the main focus of history, was World War II. I mean, like, think about, is there any other war with that many movies, shows, books, nightly mentions on the news still to this day? They really want to beat that into people's heads because nationalism is against the world order's idea. So if they can combine those ideas and put everybody in a bottle where they think, you shouldn't look out for yourself where you live. Um, they can vilify that idea, and it takes away the firewalls of tyranny. So if there's only going to be one government basically in the world, then you can't hide anywhere. You can't disagree. So they have to have that before they start implementing all these rules on farmers. And I saw one today where I think they're filing lawsuits. They're starting to go the lawfare route to fight these like the European Union and stuff. They have all of these countries going hand in hand to shut down farmers, and then at the same time they're shutting down their ability to heat themselves and all of these other things at once. It's war on people, and hopefully the tides change on that, but I just don't see it. So I'm looking for a lot of people to freeze in the UK, a lot of elderly. The food prices are going to go up in Europe. They're going to they're going to fight our end of the regime on some of the trade things. So it's going to be really interesting how the availability of products and freedom kind of pan out worldwide now. Because it seems like we broke that idea that the U.S. is going to be in it, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of people still working to be not only the head of the world government, but a main part of it. And then you got China and Russia have the same ideas about world government. They're just on the other end of who's going to be the management.
Yeah, so you run a couple thoughts with me. If you go to, I'm going to retweet this here on the Adapt 2030 channel because I was looking at this. This is from Wide Awake Media, and they say, when we eat meat and dairy, this is causing 20% of all greenhouse gas emissions. So the meat and dairy industry is now liable for the damages that they cause. The litigiousness, what you're talking about, this lawfare thing is going to continue. Now, what they're going to do is go after them just like they have been the oil companies. You have to realize that's your food supply. It's not an oil well somewhere or a natural gas well somewhere that's leaking, that's going, uncapped. And there's a huge amount of leakage coming out of the capped wells, by the way. So they're trying to lawfare all these things and bring sensors and monitors out to some of these capped natural gas wells that, they've reached peak production, they've siphoned them off, but still there's a little bit of leakage, and not much. But they're going out with a sensor, and if they can find one molecule that leaked out of methane, you're going to get fined. Well, it's the same thing. Like, how can you put the entire meat and dairy industry on notice that you have done something to the planet when that's still not provable? But the next thing is they're taking away your food supply by doing this under the guise of something they've already planted seeds for in terms of climate change. Like with this magnetic field anomaly that's here already, and with the changing solar magnetic field and what we're experiencing on our Earth with the decline in Earth's magnetic field, like this was already projected out into the future along with this grand solar minimum and very low solar activity anticipated after this solar cycle. It was anticipated last solar cycle, but everybody got that wrong this solar cycle coming up. So when we start to see declines in temperature, that means declines in food production. And then suddenly the dairy industry is responsible for everything. Well, if we're going to have a difficult enough time growing enough food coming into the conditions we're coming into with a decreasing magnetic field on our planet, more cosmic rays, heavier rainfall after we're off of solar maximum here, galactic cosmic rays and cosmic rays create more clouds. So after we're at solar maximum now, and once we dip off into that, the amount of cloud coverage is going to get ridiculous. If you think there's a lot of floods now, wait for 4 or 5 more years when we really start to get into the overlap of extreme low solar activity, heavier cloud cover, and solar magnetic fields changing enough to now disrupt jet streams and cloud cells. We're not going to be able to grow enough food barely anyway. So you see the posturing of governments around the world. They've already moved to try to front run these crop losses. And now they want to take another entire leg out of protein source for the planet. Or at the very minimum, they're going to try to charge you more for a CO2 tax based on. But again, they want you to stop eating meat. The CO2 taxes are a wealth transfer device. And what are you going to do at the end of the day? People can barely afford groceries now. What happens if they double or triple in price because of this new lawfare that goes against the dairy and cattle industry? I know a lot of people who work in that industry. They're very honest, hardworking people that try to bring you food every single day so you don't starve. They go out, they work late at night. They're out in inclement weather. They are in disastrous situations to rescue their cattle and make sure your food arrives every single day, and your milk. And the products derived from milk, like the baby formulas, for an example.
Right.
The cheeses, that whole cheese industry. Those people work their entire life to bring you food. And if they go away and they can't produce food for you, then you are going to starve. And then what kind of, like, thumb screws can people put on if you're starving and your family's starving? I don't know, Ransom. What do you think?
I think it's silly. If you've ever crossed the U.S., like just on any interstate, you're going to realize that the majority of the U.S. is people making a living through farming or ranching or dairy or something like that. And plus, I can debunk that whole tweet that they're talking about that right there. Carbon. This is my favorite slide now, because it shows the other hominid, right? And it shows the temperature variation. And can I ask any of these global warming or man-made climate change specialists or activists, what was Homo erectus and this other guy here? I don't even know how to pronounce that. What were these guys doing back then in the past that made the temperature go up? Nothing. They just happened to be living on the land. And imagine how many bison and oryx and all of the other grazing animals that were all over the planet, farting and eating and producing milk for their babies. The whole concept is silly. And we're just in this last little blue band at the end, the Industrial Revolution. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 warming periods there.
Yeah, those are interglacial periods right there you're looking at.
Right. And these hominids probably not even near the numbers we are, which means that the grazing animals were in the large numbers, millions, because they were barely putting a dent in the hunting. And that's another area of science that was kind of bogus when they gave you this idea that, oh, all of a sudden humans showed up and we made everything go extinct. But the truth is that megafauna and humans alike were going extinct because something happened in this whole 10,000 year period. Is the rebound that we call civilization now. Everything from domestication, organized agriculture, cities, domestication of farm animals, horses, pyramids, bronze, everything. It's all in the last 10,000 years after something happened. But if you go back before that, there were large numbers of herbivores everywhere, farting and puffing out methane and CO2, and it had nothing to do with us. Do you think Homo erectus was firing up coal-fired power plants and driving around their SUVs? No, they weren't. They just happened to be on the planet during that cycle.
Yeah, if you go to the GISP 2 ice core data set, temperature reconstruction, that's my favorite chart because it shows you that you were saying in the last 10,000 years. So we came out of the Younger Dryas. That's GISP 2 ice core temperature reconstruction. This is the gold standard that everybody used to use way back until they needed global warming as a narrative to come out, and then they quit using this chart. But for years and years, this was the gold standard to show global temperatures. They drilled down through Greenland and took out ice cores and actually measured the CO2 concentrations in there. The thing about this one is we came out of the Younger Dryas, it started to warm up, and then suddenly around 8,000 years prior, the temperature just dropped back out like almost 3.5 degrees Celsius, which would be about 9 degrees Fahrenheit. 8.7 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperature difference globally as the average down. Ransom, did you find that chart there? GISP2, and you'll see
Yes.
that Joe Nova did it. Yeah, and if you put that one up there, that's such the best chart because the temperature variance here in the last 10,000 years has not been stable either. It's been up and down multiple degrees, 2 degrees Celsius up, 2 degrees Celsius down, and then the 8.1 or 8.2 K year event, 8,000 years prior. You know, the temperature's rising, and then it dropped out 3.5 degrees Celsius down, and then suddenly, you know, it rose back up again. Like, what's causing those rises and falls? Yeah, that's a good one right there. You're following the red if you're looking at the graph with us tonight. That's the shaded area of the temperatures. So what's causing those rises and falls? You know, you can look at the time on this too. We're talking, you know, an enormous amount of time, and you're going from the right side, which is where we sit today in the little ice age era, coming out of that, all the way to the past. But the thing is, each successive step down is cooler than the last. So obviously, if you're coming out of an ice age, once it gets warm in that first initial couple thousand years, that's where you're going to get your peak warming. And that's where that 8,000 year event is. And then you can see as it was trying to get up to the peak warming right around 7,000 years ago, specifically when the Sumerians start to evolve and we start to get the first, you know, cuneiform text in Babylonia and Mesopotamia, suddenly that just comes at that spike coming up at around 7,500 years ago, that heat spike. Suddenly the Sumerians rise out of that. But you had that, see that severe drop down there. That's the thing that crashed society. So whatever evolved and lived through the Younger Dryas got to that point right where it was starting to heat, and wham, it just dropped off. And whoever was there, if they were not near the equator, were absolutely wiped back again to nothing. That is a full wipeout of the global food production system in the world we live in up to 40 degrees north today. Anything probably 30 degrees, 35 degrees north latitude and 35 south up to the poles would have been very little yield or no yield. And specifically 40 north to 40 south, zero. There would have been nothing growing. And then subsequently, when you see that very drop off there, it says 32.5 degrees. And then it rolls all the way up to almost 28 and a half, or between, well, they just say 28.75. That is a huge dip. That's so much change there. They're yapping about like a degree or so coming off of 100 years. This is 3 degrees Celsius that we've already seen in our past. That's insane. And you know, see how fast that's vertical. So what caused that change? And going through the chart, every time you see a significant drop off in temperature, that was a collapse of the society and the civilization at that time. So what brings it to the point of civilization of going to its apex, to its maximum art? You're at the point of art, and you're at engineering and mathematics, and you've reached these pinnacles of civilization throughout history, and then suddenly, whoosh, it collapses. There's your collapse reasoning. The temperature dropped and they couldn't grow crops reliably. The plant and harvest dates were out and the actual yield numbers were down. So the society, those living there, had to move to better places because what we consider global logistics wasn't in play then. Regional, absolutely, but global, no. So you can see clearly, and I would ask everybody out there, use that same chart, mark it with the collapse of civilizations, and they're right on that same timeline and actual temperature line of rise and falls. When on the inverse, when the temperature is going up, you're going to find the beginnings of a huge amount of cultural, what we consider like behemoths. And once they reach that pinnacle point, it just drops off. And that's the explanation right there for you for the rise and fall of civilization. And, you know, I covered this in a couple bullet points before in the Civilization Cycle show notes. And you can find that at civilizationcycle.com. If you go there, we have the player for the live show. And also, if you put your email in, we'll give you the show notes of what we talked about in just like 8 bullet points. That was one of the bullet points that I was very specific, or actually I probably had to split into 2 to cover that very thing. The temperature apex is at the top of the civilization, and as we decline, and it's just it's a fingerprint of history. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. Excuse me.
I was going to point out it even goes further than that. If you look at this other chart I got back up there, in the middle, it goes 1 million years before present. And when you look at that based on the up and downs, you can see that every time it got severely cold, like really, really cold or really hot, right afterwards, you get a new species. Species show up. You get Homo neanderthalis, Homo sapiens, probably Denisovan was on one of these charts. And you got to wonder, like, whenever the environment forces the extremes, you have to adapt. Obviously, these hominids did, or we wouldn't be here today. So, how do you think that would fit in when we have technological nations that are also depending on these changes? And some of those look like they happen abruptly. Um, and I
Most
mean,
of them are abrupt, though. The one we're in now is very gradual. Usually it drops off and it occurs faster.
so what would the world kind of respond to if things actually went to the extremes in the northern latitudes? Because judging by last week or just a few days ago, we had an early fall storm. I know they call it a winter storm, but it's November, right? And there was 4 foot of snow in different places. There was cattle struggling to get through. And you imagine if you're dependent on that meat and 1, 2, 3 storms come in a row, your food is wiped out. And not only just for now, but for years to come. Because it would take a
Yeah, the
while to.
carryover stocks are not as robust as they used to be. I'll make a statement that when I started the Adapt 2030 channel back in 2014, I would look at the carryover stocks. It'd be like, 750 million tons on average, because you could go in and get the USDA data, excuse me, for the entire global, for the wheat production, grains production, whatever. Sandwich those all together, and they already put the totals in. It was like a 50-page PDF they release every month. Carryover stocks were about 750 million tons. Right now, when you go there, they're somewhere around 350 million tons ish. So I'm wondering, where did 500 million or 400 million tons of our carryover grain stock go to? That's what you're describing, is the grain you grew this year, you hold on to it until next year, and you can still use it all through the whole year, provided A, it grows, and B, you can store it correctly in cool, dry conditions. Anything wet, cold, wet, dry, wet, you're done. Has to be dry for sure and cool best. That's gone. And yeah, like I said, please remember the show notes here for civilizationcycle.com. That's the website. The podcasts and the different shows that we've done before that have been edited and then put out as 30-minute segments. You can listen to that while you're working on something, getting ready, cooking dinner, whatnot. Put your email in there. We'll get you the show notes again, civilizationcycle.com. That was a note from Ransom. Thanks for remembering to say that. But if you can't get enough food to move from one year to the next, we literally go back into the 1500s again. Our modern society is based on incredible storage facilities. Like, we've wired that science in. But if you don't have the proper training to do that, and people are in place that don't have the proper training or the skill, then that's all worthless. So I'm wondering, at what year do we roll over to the point where we don't? I've said 2028. That's been my forecast for quite some years. It's just math. So if you take the declines in the carryover stocks each year on how many millions of tons are disappearing and roll that out into the future, and as we're stepping off solar maximum here and we're coming into a cooler period anyway, once we get around 2028, 29, it might make news that, food prices are going to go up way further than they are today, because whatever we grow is what we get. And once we reach that integral point, they might call it, if you're looking at consciousness with AI, where it becomes a self-aware and conscious entity in itself, and there's names for it, like 0 point or singularity, or some of these demarcations in time. We are there. when we cannot grow enough food to carry over to the next year. That will be another point reached where what we grow is what we get in our world. Wherever that will be a shift of an age. Absolutely a shift of an age. Stability will no longer be guaranteed. So how's the government shift from there? Or are they shifting now, front running everything? Like there's a huge amount of like just incredible shakeup going off across the planet. But are they doing that right now to try to front run all these things coming in 2028, 29 with the crop losses, food shortages, carryover stock debacles? I'm just curious because it's kind of it would be the perfect timing to do it now because you get the 4 years, right? 25 through 29 or to 28, let's say. That's the point where you're going to reach that rollover where there's not going to be enough food grown on the planet to carry over for the next year. So I'm just wondering, there's a lot of things in play. I have a lot of questions, but that I don't have answers for. But it will occur in time.
Well, the prices are still going up. According to this one, still 5.5% from last year. And
that's think very low. Are you kidding me? 5.5% for food increase? No way.
Well, that's according to the United Nations
that could be per
Food
month.
Price Index. Right, it goes up and down that much. But even they're having to admit, and what happens when all of these farmers in Europe go on strike together? And they just don't produce. They save what they have, because I'm sure they have enough to make it a little while. And then they just cut off the public and show them what will happen if the governments continue to cut their production down and increase rules that don't jive with actual science. Like the whole argument of CO2 is easily debunked. And I don't understand how still millions of people can't just simply look at a graph and say, oh, wait a minute. Why are they saying that? But even the vegetable oil going up 2-year high. So like you see it in every indicator that things are going to continue to go up.
It is, but I got 2 words for you. Government confiscation. If you as farmers, as a group together, you'd be charged with some sort of law. Absolutely, you would be. They would come in and confiscate everything you're holding. They would take your seed supply. They'd take your machinery. They're like, okay, well, we're going to hire some people to go in and plant the fields. You won't do it. You're causing a national security issue. We're going to confiscate everything. And we're going to put it in the hands of those people who will grow.
I was going to bring that up. With all of these new trends towards conscription and other things, people forget the things that follow is when you're in wartime, the government starts saying, well, you're going to have to contribute a little bit of that to our effort. And then you get into the scenarios of people getting attacked for not having patriotism because they didn't give over their private property to the state to help the war effort. I mean, all of that's happened in the past. So I'm actually been watching the headlines waiting for those exact kind of things where the government is saying, well, we're going to seize this because we need this, that, and the other thing. It's just like a communist country. When we watched Venezuela turn over, you had Chavez out there in the streets going, I like this house. I like this factory. It's now the states. And even the supposed freedom-loving countries do the same things in wartime. So I'm looking for, in the next couple years, them really attacking gold, Bitcoin, food production, especially as far as producing it for your local area. Kind of the trend that went against the Amish all the time. I mean, you've seen that for how many decades now? Periodically, they raid them, they arrest them. And this time, weirdly, they got out and voted. Even though they're not a big percentage of the voter, they went out and they voted, and they think they're wanting to get involved now because I think they're tired of that. So we'll see what the new Make America Healthy Again people, how far this goes. And did you see the headlines about people stockpiling fluoride because they're afraid the government's going to stop putting in the water? So they're going to hoard it at home, which is
Well,
funny to
fluoride
me. I'm
used to
just
be
like,
sold by the can to kill roaches.
right. Well, we know that.
No, in the 1940s, going back to World War II, you see the old advertisements in World War II. It's a little can. You could buy baking soda in the same kind of can at Trader Joe's, little can like that. But
Right.
it said fluoride, the best roach killer. So I'm thinking, all right, well, that that can't be healthy for anybody, but
Well, not to
humans.
mention they were testing it on people to see what it would do. Oh, okay. You're lethargic.
And you just don't care. A lot of, and I don't want to, no, I really can't even say that point because we're on a few platforms. I'm going to go away with that. But I'm going to reverse back into make America healthy again. If they're not talking about victory gardens and bringing that food production back to yourself, like we need a Manhattan Project to bring victory gardens back into our homes again. Because that make America healthy kind of dovetails into think about using that excuse to get people to start home gardening again, just like they did in World War II, without really explaining that the magnetic field's changing and the carryover stocks really aren't there. We all need to start home gardening again. That would really do a lot for food resiliency if we could get people home gardening again across the entire nation like we did in the 1940s. Please put it in perspective. 40% of all food production in America from 1941 and 1945 was done in the backyard. 40%. So think about, supermarkets are going to take a hit. But your food resiliency, and if there's not carryover stocks in terms of grains, could you not grow a corn patch? I'm trying to put out a larger tobacco patch this year. I'm trying to put out a larger corn patch, but I grow heirloom stuff from the Amish, like purples, starbursts. There's not even names for these. You just look at them and I guess you identify it by the seed when you're looking at it. There's no commercial variety of it, so they can't name it and sell it. It's just like heirloom corn that has a starburst pattern. Heirloom corn that's jet black with a tinge of like purple into it, some sort of indigo corn. So that's kind of how they describe it. They look at it. There's no patents on it. It's the thousands of varieties of corn that have been around forever, and they just grow the variety that they think the pigs like. The guy I buy my meat from, name's Jonathan, Amish guy. He grows like 20 acres of corn just for the animals, just for the feed. Of heirloom varieties, not commercially available, just from old school, whatever was in Tennessee over the last couple hundred years. They've gotten a nice variety that could be animal fodder. You could turn it into alcohol. You can ethanol it. You can do a lot of things with it. That's the cornmeal muffins. It turns into cooking corn, and it turns into animal feed, and it turns into a distillable as well. So that's the one they've chosen, and it seems to work for a lot of people. Like crab apples, that's good for distilling, good for animal feed also.
Sorry, I muted myself. I was gonna say I've been doing this experiment for I think 4 years now. So last year I just let whatever grow that was left over, seeds wherever they fell, and still food came up. But we saw a major difference in our grocery bill compared to the just 2 years that I joked around basically farming because I didn't really take it that serious. I was calling it the minimal effort garden, right? So I was just planting stuff, and just the amount of greens that we got in our diet was enough to, we only really had to buy food if we wanted to, right? And now this year we didn't have all that extra squash and different things, that fruit and stuff that I grew, so it made everything a lot more expensive this year as far as always trying to find fresh organic vegetables to go with our meat. So just that little bit of gardening made an enormous difference. I saw your dog.
Yeah, I was gonna say puppy cameo.
I
Dogs
missed
are
it.
like
They
anything,
missed
man.
it.
They just love attention, and this one's an abandoned dog,
Yeah, I was
like
going
the
to laugh
original.
because I see the
No, foxhound.
reflection of them.
Yeah, she's a foxhound. I wish she'd come back again. Super cute, real pretty dog, very loyal, and The story for this one,
We,
my wife and myself, we were in the back room here, and the back of our cabin looks out into the forest. And all of a sudden, we saw a few neighbors' dogs walking by, and there was this little tiny one, like this big, walking with it. And then the main pack of dogs, which were our neighbors before they put more fences up around their place, actually looked in our window, barked at us, got our attention. And that was the weirdest thing. They all made noise, so we'd actually look out the window. And once we looked out and we go, oh, look at the dogs. Oh, there's a little puppy. As soon as they noticed that, boom, all of the big ones took off. And they left this little white thing in the front of in the back there by itself. And we're like, that's weird. So then I got it and I gave it some food and water, and it's like, okay, I'll leave it here. The mother will come back for it, and they never came back. So we ended up adopting it, took it to the vet, had a bunch of fleas, got it all cleaned out, worms and thing. And we just took it in, loved it. And it's like the greatest dog. That thing can smell and track and find things that just mind boggling, animals. And it's a security thing too. You're going to need dogs on your property in the future world we're moving into, but then how do you feed them?
right. Well, pit bulls are good for that. That you can just feed them scraps, and they seem to do fine, and they're good security. As far as that goes, we were joking around here the other day talking about if things really got wild and the food stopped, which of the pets would you eat first? The neighbor's pet? Your pet? I know that sounds harsh, but it is a backup emergency meat source. I don't know if you could do it to your friend. You might have to trade pets with the neighbor or something if it was that bad. But no, I'm just kidding. I don't think it'll get that bad anytime soon, but you can't exclude nature from putting you in a spot that was just I mean, not to harp on about those floods, but when we were on, we were warning people that, take it serious. If you live in a valley, you better know where to go. And sure enough, lots of destruction, people cut off from the world. They had to live out that exact scenario we were talking about. No phones, no internet, no food, no clean water, no electricity, no heat, nothing. And I hate to harp on that, but we did say there's nobody coming to help you. You got to help yourself.
Yeah. No, go, man. Go.
No, I was just going to say that's cool. I was noticing the dogs in the reflection, so I know they're real loyal. They come check on you every couple seconds. Make sure you're still there and everything.
Yeah, because we have a Catahoula also, which is a cattle dog. And that one's like super smart, helps me get the chickens back in, round up the turkeys for the night, that kind of stuff. You're like, we work in a pair. I'm like, hey, go this way. And he goes that way. And he'll like bring everything toward me where I can open the gate and then like kind of funnel them in there. Because I figured it's a waste your time. Again, you need to use animals like a dog to help you if you're on a farm to get the animals in and work with you together. Because if I was going to try to chase the chickens or turkeys down right around sunset and bring them in, yeah, it's almost like a comedy video, like a Benny Hill video, running around, like running around. This makes no sense. Where you're going to go trying to chase these things? But you get a dog to work with you, and they're very clean on, go this way, bring them over this way. Like my dog understands when I go psh, psh, like this,
Right.
It's amazing to work with another animal that's not human and get that interaction of it understands you, but it's so sentient and smart that it can do what you ask it and like work together with. And at that point, you're like, you're not going to eat those two because that's my safety right there. I'll go hunt in the woods. We can, we can scorch out a bunch of squirrels, possums, birds, pheasants, raccoons, whatever. There's a ton of stuff around here. Deer, got some bear occasionally.
Yeah,
but you're not gonna hit my dog, so we're gonna have a problem with that, like serious problem.
I was actually kidding about that.
No, but you're not. I mean, you're not. You are, but you're not. But a lot of people, when they get that hungry, they're gonna go that direction. And I'm telling you right now, like some people in the cities or suburbs might give up their animal and be like, okay, don't hurt my family and whatever. We all need to eat. Kumbaya. But down here in the farm country, when I need that dog for my safety, you're gonna have a problem, like a real problem. like a
I have
serious.
a guy in the audience that says
Yeah,
his cats bring him rabbits, kind of like
that's
dogs
right.
bring
And
stuff.
mice and moles and all kind of stuff, right? Like you could eat that in a pinch.
Right. And not only that, if you're setting those little traps in your gardens, then you'll get,
Yes,
gophers and whatnot. Besides that, somebody
safe
gave
traps.
gave me a great idea. We should start a project on Civilization Cycle where every one of our viewers plants 5 fruit trees this year.
Yeah, and again,
Like,
that'd be great. That'd be a great exercise for people. Let me put up that on the Buy Me a Coffee. I'll put that up as a post on Buy Me a Coffee /Civilization Cycle. If you want to go in there support our work, please head to buymeacoffee.com /Civilization Cycle. Because when you get into these areas, you're going to have to know the topography, like how much drainage there is. If you want to do apple trees, you're going to need to know which things like figs, if they like, some more wet soil. You're going to have to do a
right,
lot of study. That'd be a great challenge. Plant 5 fruit trees, dwarf variety, that will give you fruit. And like the first fruit will come in like the second year, but third year,
right.
it start to get more set.
I have I think it's now 5-year-old lime tree outside, and it still
Yeah,
has
what's
the
it doing
spikes
for you?
on it. Yep, we're
How
waiting
much
for
are you
fruit.
getting any fruit?
No, I
You
think
need
it's
to trim it.
because
You need to prune it.
right. I think it's also because it's been surviving through the winters here, right? So it's waiting to get bigger. And then you can't eat the fruit the first year anyway. But I've been looking at neighbors who have fruit trees that waste probably hundreds of pounds of foods per tree, and they just clean it up and throw it away. It's just crazy.
Yeah, and that's all animal food too. Think if you have chickens, those apples and the berries, and we give ours, if we cook beans and we don't eat all the beans, chickens love beans. They love fruit. I'm telling you, they love peaches because we have 12 peach trees out here. They set huge this year. We had like 1,000 pounds of peaches. Like you say, it's coming into that first like maturation period. So a lot of them weren't really juicy and fruity and whatnot. And so the insect damage and thing, cold damage, rain, I shouldn't say cold, excuse me, rain damage, where we had the fruit were all set and then it rained for like 10 days straight, and we had a lot of pits inside the top. But when the raindrop came down, it hit on that very fragile fruit surface. So we weren't going to eat that. We tried to cut a little bit away. It was always kind of damaged down to the pit. Chickens absolutely loved it. Chickens and our ducks and our turkeys all ate that. So think about a fruit orchard as supplemental food for your chickens, turkeys, and geese or ducks if you're raising them, and you as well. And you can distill that to create alcohols, A, for rubbing alcohols off the first on the 4 shots with the methanol, disinfecting anything, cleaning supplies. And once you run off that first 4 shot, that very first, like, quart or something of, number one, if you're going to run it in 8 jars on a gallon, you can use that for cuts, scrapes, abrasions, anything medicinals. So that fruit becomes your medicine, it becomes your cleaning supply, and it also becomes a tradable if you're into that and you know how to take the fruit, throw some yeast into it, get it to mash down, and then distill it out and turn it into a tradable product. So look at fruit as not just fruit. There's multiple ways that you can use that. And then plus us, we're going to be trading with the Amish next year because we overproduce our fruit. They don't grow any fruit. So they're going to
Sweet.
come and help us manage the orchard a little bit. We're going to get the yield off of this and then trade them for different things through the year. So the overage that we're never going to use, plus what we eat, think about the win-win-win in that. Everybody needs an orchard. Please remember, buymeacoffee.com /Civilization Cycle. We'll be right back after the break. Appreciate you joining us and share the ideas. See what other people think.
Oops. I pressed the wrong button. What happened? Ah. What? It looks like I'll have to talk to the commercial. No commercial. Awkward. I guess I'll just hang out with you. Hang out with you till the break's over. And don't forget to buy us a coffee there. And sign up for our show notes. We had a malfunction. So I'll be back after these messages. Oh, wow, that didn't work either. Weird.
Humanity. Number one is UFOs and aliens and their agenda for the advancement of humanity. Number two is the Jewish establishment's control over all.
Oh my God, that guy. That dude. What's up, Otto? Well, this is the first time I had this set up, so I messed it up somehow. It's supposed to play a something. Let me see here. Might be able to fix it here. Awkward. Here it is. We'll play this one.
It's unknown if early man knew they would be the progenitors of great civilizations, or if they knew when their empires would fall and disappear into history. Fortunately for us as modern man, we can recognize that we are at the precipice, a point in history where we can see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us.
How do you feed your families when the shelves are empty, the stores are shut, and there's no food available? What is the fastest, easiest, and most productive foods to grow? What is the quickest way to get somebody who has no skills at all up and running and producing very quickly? If you understand that we're at a point in history where it is no longer optional to be growing your own food, if you're like really freaked out and concerned because you've never grown food before and you don't have any skills, you don't know how to do that, but you know how important it is, then I want to let you know, however you stumbled here, you're in the right place. My name is Marjorie Wildcraft. I'm the founder of the Grow Network, and I have been the female leader in the survival and preparedness space for the last 20 years.
How to grow lots of food, even if you have no experience, are older and out of shape. This is for people who want the fastest and easiest ways to produce healthy and delicious meat, eggs, and vegetables. Because you know that growing your own food is like printing your own money. During this webinar, you will get status of global food shortages, how long the crisis will last, how much space you need to grow food, easiest, highest calorie foods you can produce, a complete plan for producing all the food you need, how to get started today, regardless of season. Marjorie will show you the fastest, easiest, and simplest ways to produce calories and nutrition, especially in a crisis and/or grid-down situation. The assumption is that you have no experience and you need to start producing food immediately. The most popular part of the webinar is the Q&A session at the end. So please come prepared with your questions.
Pro Clear Cleanse is the most powerful spray cleaner on the market today. No elbow grease necessary. Pro Clear Cleanse cuts through grease and grime like a chef's knife.
Right. Talking about the pertinent issues. So where does our world move from here is really, and what matters most to us? Us, I mean, everybody on the planet. Like if we take away all politicians on the planet, we're still going to be fine. It's about what about us for the human race that do we need for everybody to come through and continue to prosper and thrive during this time. Now, just before the break, we were talking about fruit production, and that's a great call out that Ransom had mentioned. Can everybody grow 5 fruit trees? They don't have to be in a line. You could put them around your property in different places, depending on the grow conditions for each individual area of your property. But think about fruit as a tradable, as a usable for food for animals like chickens or ducks or something that you might have. And then also if you have the skill to be able to turn that into some sort of distilled product or fermented product. Could be apple juice, hard cider, or just, distilled out after you mash it up. bring it out from say 18% down into something more distilled, which can then be used as medicines and alcohols and cleaning products and tradables. So again, you got the tradable end on the fresh fruit, you got the tradable end on the distilled fruits. With that being said, Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk tonight. And if anybody...
The one cleaner that can do it all.
Many ways to keep this platform on air. We just saw what happened with Alex Jones. So every free speech platform right now needs help to stay on air and make sure they stay on air with the running costs and with the expenses. So we'll see what happens. That was one of the, I am a fan, but not the greatest fan. I like the information, the person behind it, cool. But I just don't like the way that we are guaranteed with our rights as free speech that they can shut down an entire platform because they said the wrong thing. At what point do the people on the other side of the curtain go, oh, I said something wrong too, and now we're going to get shut down? Like it can't work that way. You either have or you don't have that right. It can't be arbitrary. It just can't be. And this is the way I wanted to start the second hour here, talking about, if you set something up, and, I'm coming back to Ransom's Grow 5 Trees. If you have more land and even if you don't have the time to maintain it, somebody else will come and take care of it for you if they can get the bounty of nature from that. If they can come and help take care of your garden or your orchard and maintain it for you, and they want percentage of the yield after that, awesome. Because somebody took care of it and did something for you that you can't do yourself. So think about that. Even if you have the land, offer some people some space so they can come out and grow something for you. But Ransom, take it away, man. Second hour. And as always, what do we value as humanity right now?
Family and a full belly. I mean, that's really what matters.
Family and a food belly. That's great. That's a double word answer. Bam, drop mic.
And also for people to be able to live without the constant bombardment of worldwide fears being pressed on them. It's just nonstop stuff that is meant to keep people in disarray so that they're distracted.
Describe the stuff, though. You said stuff. Like, give me some, concrete examples of stuff.
Of, stuff they make you worry about. The economy, food prices. And, yes, they're real things that you have to worry about. But if you're worried about that, and you're worried about global warming, and you're worried about whether or not Putin is going to do something to you, whoever boogeyman of whichever channel you're watching, because they have different angles on what you should worry about. That's the kind of stuff that they continually make people worry about. Or are they going to be able to pay their mortgage or their rent? Is the utility highs going to ever go away? Or are they going to continue working to the bone to barely have a few cents left over at the next month? That month-to-month fear of being homeless. I mean, I have not paid rent in so long that I kind of forgot. But if you're a renter or you have a mortgage or you're renting to own or any of those options, it only takes one life mess up and you could be out on the street. And people forget that. So that's a thing that you have to worry about. But at the same time, they keep the levels of fear of all these other things where people are misdirected. And instead of concentrating on their family and a full belly and the simple things in life, they're just continually bombarded with this other stuff. And I was talking about, I think we're going to have bad times, but 6 to 8 months away. And the reason I say that is because there's going to be some pushback on the changes. So in the short term, things are going to start looking really good, at least here in the U.S. I mean, options are open up, especially in the housing market. There are no houses. I've been looking, and the only things that I could trade in everything I own for and go get in are places that are dilapidated. The well don't work. It's, hundreds of miles from anywhere. And although that sounds like a sweet dream to me to go out there in the middle of nowhere. If you have a family, it's hard to, ask them to deal with it too, or it's hard to at least. Some families will just, whatever. But if you don't have water, you don't have farming. And if you don't have farming, then you can't make extra food. And you're stuck in that spot. And the majority of Americans, at least, are stuck on the month to month. They don't even have time to think about, well, maybe I should grow some stuff. Maybe I should can some stuff. Maybe I should start stockpiling stuff. And when things start to look good, people forget that things can go bad again. And they only remember that when things are bad. That's too late. So even if things start looking, sunshine, rainbows, great future ahead, you still need to be preparing for in case it doesn't continue that way. And hopefully I didn't offend anybody, because I know I lost, I don't know, probably 30 or 40 subs November 6th because of the little videos I was posting. So people are upset. But then again, other people are happy. And somewhere in the middle, people need to drop these ideas that it's us versus them. And remember that your neighbor is going to be more normal if anything happens. So like if the internet cut off and the news cut off, about 2 weeks later, they'll be willing to talk to you. They start to forget that they're constantly bombarded with the tribalism. And that's how they keep everybody divided. And that's how they keep everybody distracted. And they're going to keep pushing this idea because there are social engineers that are interested in destabilizing the West still. And although people think, well, it's going to change, you're going to start seeing some other things, the other shoe to drop, so to speak, in months to come. I just see that happening. There's going to be, what they call that, the honeymoon period, right? We're going to have the honeymoon, stocks, Bitcoin, everything's all going to go up, but then it's going to come back down. And that's what you have to be prepared for. Like, should you be selling your Bitcoin right now that it's at $87,000 a coin? Oh, God. It went up again. So is that a gamble? Should you sell it when it's at a high? Or are you going to, keep on faith and then wait till it gets back down to 35,000 to sell it? Because I feel bad. I sold mine when it was up a little bit, and then it went really down. And I thought, whew, but now it's so far up. If I'd have just been patient, I could be cha-chinging right now.
Depends if you're a trader or if you're a hodler. I don't know. If I could respond to a couple of those comments you made there. 6 to 8 months, if you're talking about crypto here, most people agree that over the last halving cycles with Bitcoin, that there's a run-up period after that, and we're in that now. And if you go to Plan B and take a look at some of this information, 100 trillion, this person has mapped out stock-to-flow models, and it shows that the peak should be, and if Ransom, if you could find a stock-to-flow model on Twitter somewhere, you can find one of those charts, stock-to-flow, and Plan B, and that you can find one of those models there, and you run it out. So since the inception of Bitcoin, the way it behaves before it halves and then after the halving, and there's a cycle to it, how it runs up, and then there's a cycle and a bull peak, and then it drops off. So if you're going to look at this last halving cycle, the market's much more mature. So they're looking, and I just wrote some notes down here, September to October of 2025 should be, based on past cycles, this market top here for this cycle of the halving cycle. And then after that, you're going to want to put in, you're going to want to sell short or just go even short. You don't have to leverage on it. Just, not in financial advice, but just the simplest thing to do if you were where you were, Ransom. Think about 6 to 8 months from now, once it hits up to somewhere, I don't know, the numbers are so different for the Bitcoin price. I'm not even going to conject here or throw the numbers out, but the numbers on the peak for this cycle should be September, October 2025. And then from there, it's going to cascade downward until the next halving cycle. But knowing that information in advance, if you'd made all that money running up, then you could just sell your Bitcoin and put it into a short position and then take it on the way down as nothing leveraged. It's just a single, I believe the price will go down, and as much as it goes down, then you're making profit from that. Because you can trade the markets either direction. And this is what Bob Kudla taught me a lot is, you don't have to leverage anything. If you just got a general market trend going out and not financial advice, it's like if you know the market top might be around September, October of 2025 and Bitcoin's sitting at multi-hundreds of thousands, okay, great. Turn that position that you ownership into a short position and just hold on to it as a one-to-one. You're not leveraging anything. I'm just saying if the market goes down, it's still going to accrue in value in the different direction. And that's all you do is you take out a short position on it. But you're not going to leverage anything. And that's the whole thing about once you see these general trends in the markets going up and down. So the fervor, like you say, new guy fever or whatever you want to talk, honeymoon period, new guy fever. There's a whole bunch, terms for this. It will run. It's going to run like a scalded dog. And now with Doge and all these things, the Department of something, and then Dogecoin's running. I mean, they're looking for massive amounts of increases. Like XRP, also not financial advice, but as I've seen, XRP is going to be like integrated into the new system of central bank digital currencies where the ledger is going to settle in a certain amount of minutes globally. So XRP is going to be the base point for that usage case. It's going to be XRP on demand liquidity, but XRP, the token, is in that ecosystem. Again, not financial advice. Just like they're broadcasting everything that's moving forward, like Doge and XRP. If you can't see that, everybody's broadcasting this and like a huge billboard sign with gigantic colored lights on it. Hold on. There's some potentiality here for you to look into the future. If you got the broadcast lights and they're like, this one is going to be part of the new financial ecosystem moving forward that we're moving into, that everybody in the new coalescing, administration's coming into, we're going to run with this one. And that's going to be the base layer for everything to settle in minutes on a global financial system. Here's the whole thing too. Like, don't be deluded by a single person. They're taking this still into the technocracy. You might like the dude, you might like the party, you might like the message, and that's fine. But they're still dragging us down this road of digital IDs, track and trace. If you're into that, that's fine. Everybody's supporting it now. Suddenly, because this other guy got into power, suddenly zero trust and digital IDs are totally okay for the masses. Before they weren't. And then how did this switcheroo get put into place? Like, you see the technocracy is moving forward. It's a global system. And Ransom, might I add here, for those of you out there who want our show notes, tonight I did the release here, point number 8. Shall I read it to you? The era of data storage and role of central bank digital currencies in facilitating global trade by establishing a global government with a single internet and monetary system. That's the bullet point. We're there right now. They're moving to a global system of governance with monetary systems and internet. And whatever we are in the United States is moving toward that globalist. It might be right now coming back to nationalist, but somehow this nationalism is going to absolutely blend into this monetary system on a global governance structure. It has to, because CBDCs are the future. There's no way to go away from it. That's the whole thing. You can't stop it. There's no stopping in this. That's the point. They're on a celestial timeline that has to match the perceptual awareness of humanity with what they're putting in technologically. That's the caveat of it all. And I know, Ransom, you can respond to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be continuing on. And matter of fact, they're just deciding who's going to get to have the reins on that. I know this sounds messed up, but if I was to give financial advice, because, I don't have a lot of money to invest, but if I just had extra thousands of dollars to invest, I would probably invest in Raytheon, the military-industrial complex, and a bunch of startup
Oh,
American
that's kind of a dirty
companies.
stock to own, man. Your karma's tied to that one, dude. Just death and destruction, and that's all they use for that. That's
I
kind of
know,
rough.
but you know when certain people get picked for things that they're going to be making money. And this is one of those things that happens no matter which guy gets in there. So you could have had the other people win, Raytheon, military industrial stock, all going to go up. It's still going to go up. I mean, that's like sound financial advice. So what power do people have with stocks when the smart people know things are going to happen and they keep investing and keep making, billions and billions off of obvious trends that are about to happen? Matter of fact, I have a feeling that we're going to get back into the international arms sales in mass. So I bet places like Taiwan, Japan, all kinds of people are going to be buying a bunch of our stuff all of a sudden, as far as military.
But what's it all need, though?
I don't know. It could be
silver. It all needs silver.
Right. I was going to say that. They're going to need the metals, right?
Metals. Conductive metals. Now, you could say copper and whatnot, okay, but copper should rise in price because all these like white elephant projects, they're going to go forward if they're viable or not. Everything needs copper. But silver in itself, reading a couple articles, there's 5 pounds of silver in every single missile. The new solid state batteries are going to use a full kilogram of silver moving forward to the EV economy. And silver, I think, is, now again, not investment advice, but just looking at the future trend, they're going to need silver for everything. If you're going to bump up the war machine and weapon sales, they're going to need more silver. The EV economy for just the vehicles itself, a kilogram of silver per battery, that's a lot. And now we're going to need more silver for the solar panels. Forget the windmills, those things weigh multi-tons, but they use about 30 pounds of silver per windmill. That can be recycled, though. But you're looking at the non-recyclables, like when you blow up a missile, that silver's gone. It's shredded into microparticles. If you're looking at in the solar panels, and I was reading an article today or yesterday, silver needs to reach $200 per ounce before the recycling of our current solar panels is ROI positive. At what we look today at $30, nobody's going to touch recycling a solar panel. And I talked to a guy before, he's very wealthy, the most wealthy person I've ever spoken to in my life ever. And he invited me by for a 3-day thing at his house. And, we got to go to eat dinner together and talk all these things. But he told me one thing that was very clean. And I always remember this moment for the rest of my life. It's such burned into my memory. We're having dinner. We're talking around, it was 15 people at the table, and everybody's got their thing going on. And, I was talking about, the peak oil thing and the metals and the ROI on trying to recycle materials. And he just looks at me in the eye and he held up his glass and he goes, whenever it gets expensive enough and that point is reached, you will always have new technologies that will make what you thought were impossible suddenly become possible, and there will be no more shortages. And he clinked my glass after that. I will never forget that moment in my entire life of sitting with a billionaire at the table and told me that advice. So for me to look at $200 ROI, break even, going over that, that was the same thing with algae biodiesel. It wasn't viable unless you hit $100 per barrel. And that was the break even. It had to maintain that for a substantial amount of time before anybody was really to invest into algae biodiesel technologies. Yeah, it went up to 144, but that little blip above $100 that we saw in 2008 and 9, that thing up, that was an anomaly in time. It did not exist past that point or prior to that point. We never came back to those numbers ever again, remotely close to $150. And the same thing with silver. Once we get to that point where silver maintains above $200 an ounce it's going to have to be years, plural, then they will finally start to recycle solar panels. At $200 break even, they're not even going to think about it. If it maintains $300, $400, $500, and it's going to have to be for a substantial amount of time before people will realize it. Because the algae biodiesel was like a whiff in a pan. It came up, okay, oil rose above 100. Okay, we can hit this. By the time the technology developed to actually, and I was working on that, that's why I'm so deep into the industry. Like once we finally got to that point of rolling over and getting single grow bag systems out to do a single type of algae and then crush that, I wasn't even crushing, it was ultrasonic separation in the water column there. Once that point was reached with the efficiencies, the price of oil was already down. So none of that worked anymore. It was inefficient. You were below the break even. You were losing money every barrel. Above 100, fine, but by the time the tech caught up to it, unless that tech's mature enough where they can implement it instantly, when it goes to $205, but then big whoop, you're spending this entire factory, all the electricity, all these people to make $5 an ounce. Like how many solar panels do you have to deconstruct, rip apart to get a $5 gain on an ounce of silver? You're going to have to process hundreds of thousands of solar panels, and it's going to be in a conventional facility, in one facility only. Or two, it's going to be the centralized location for recovery of silver from solar panels prior. But you're going to have to maintain that level. And I don't think anybody would even touch it until it reaches $300 an ounce for a year. And then they might go into it. And that's just from my own getting stung, thinking that the algae the price of oil was going to stay above $100. But it never did. It never did. So the thing with silver too, if it runs to 300, is it going to stay there? Is it going to go higher? Is it a monetary metal? Is it a manufacturing metal? Or is it a new monetary system base metal along with gold and platinum, trimetallic system? Or are we sitting back where it's going to rise and then flash? And then, there's a lot of unknowns moving into the future, but none of that is financial advice. That's like real world things I lived through. And I'm trying to impart on, you need to have the tech that hits a price point that can make it viable enough, and $5 an ounce is not going to do it. You're going to have to go hundreds of dollars an ounce before they start recycling all these solar panels. And I'll leave it there.
Seems like all of the commodities are going to go up and down. Like, here's this article right here. We were talking about these. That's not it. These AI centers, right? That
AI centers, yeah, that's a big one, huh?
Yeah, that would be something that, in my mind, is absolutely going to take off.
Like, well, you're going to need to store the smart contracts for all of the new central bank digital currencies and the new ownership of assets in those places, too.
And where are they going to get all the water? See, right?
That's why there's so much contention with water rights across Colorado, for example. So if you're going to set up a new governmental system in Colorado, like they've talked about, all the water is going to be used for cooling. So the farmers aren't going to get the water there because it's going to be used for tech and, like I say, data storage issues as well as others.
Right.
Food growing indoor for certain segments of the population. Like a lot of water is going to be pulled out of that, and it's going to need to be cleaned. And then I don't know. I'm throwing some ideas out there for you.
Well, then also you got, this idea of Zuckerberg's plan to build atomic-powered data centers. So that's another different technology that they're going to need massive amounts of water for to cool this little nuclear power. And it's funny, they want to shut down nuclear power for people using it, but then you got these billionaires talking about, hey, we could run these AI data centers off of it for eternity. And this is something that is obviously a good investment for the future. The question is, which groups, which companies are going to win out this kind of fight to build these AI data centers? And where are they going to put them? And who's going to lose out on the water that they need to cool it? And then I'm also wondering, with all of this shakeup, how is it going to pan out for your fruits and vegetables that we buy from Mexico? because a trade war is about to start between the poor countries that's been supplying us with cheap goods and the U.S. that is going to try to start production to fill the niches whenever the prices start getting, thrown around different. This is what I'm trying to trip out is the supermarket is going to be crazy probably over the next year. So some things are going to skyrocket, other things are going to be really cheap. So how do you navigate that? Just the same as the stocks, buy when cheap, eat when expensive?
Home gardens again, that's a perfect way to bring it back in. Like if you can facilitate that as the first niche into something, starting the home gardens for all of the American public would be a thing. And if you're watching this video now and a year from now, we could compare these two videos to where we are now and where we sit in the future. The home gardening movement should be a thing by then. In order to stop, because think about how many vegetables come from Mexico into the United States. I understand we have California, and that's a great thing. It supplies about 30% of all the veg that we need here in the U.S. But outside that, where's it going to come from? Well, if 40% of the veg grown in America is from our own home gardens, that only leaves another 30% to kind of fill in the imports on it, doesn't it? If we got California for 30%, everybody's home gardening, that brings in another 40%, then we have just a 30% loss somewhere that needs to be filled in. Instead of having a catastrophic loss from Mexico, nobody's growing their own food, 30% is coming from California, and we have a 70% deficit of fresh veg on the planet, or I shouldn't say on the planet, excuse me, but in the U.S. But if we can get the home gardening thing going up, we can really ramp that up and plus all the efficiencies today and the different kind of seeds available. I bet we could grow a lot more things than we could in the 1940s. And, cornmeal biscuits are going to be a thing again. So get your iron cooking, skillet back out, because cornbread's going to be a thing. And if you could just kind of front run and see where society was with healthy eats, and girthy eat, I would say more like girthy eats versus healthy. Something that has some calories, something that has some protein, something that's going to fill you up, something that's going to give you energy so you can work through the day in different tasks, because our world is going to shift. The things you do now are going to be very different than the things you're going to do in another couple years. You're going to need to work out in your yard to grow food. And hopefully that'll be a healthier population, because I was watching this, I talked about this once before. I watched a show on blue zones in these areas around the world where everybody lived to be 100 years or older. The number one thing they all have in common is movement. It's not about the specific purple potato. It's not the specific about this type of seaweed in Japan. Everything had its individuality in terms of food and nutrients and water and elevation or something. But everything's standard across the board. What they all had in common, movement. People moving to till the garden, pick a plant. People need to walk up higher elevation. Movement. Just movement itself brings a longer, healthier population. Yeah, what to plant in a victory garden. So how easy would it be, Ransom? How easy would it be to move the U.S. populace back to home gardening again from where we sit today?
I think it wouldn't be that hard at all. It's trying to get people to see the value in it versus the boxed goods at the store that are easy and they cook fast and they're super expensive, and people don't realize that. When you really look at how much food you're getting in these packages, it's nothing. Last year, just squash, watermelon, tomatoes, all of that kind of stuff. I had so much of it, we had to store it. One year, I literally brought 4, 20-pound buckets up to the OPR so they could feed the pigs all the excess tomatoes I got. There was just so many of them. And then the next year, none of them grew, but I had abundance in squash and watermelons. But if I would have froze those, jarred them, whatever, I probably would still have food from the last 3 years in the shelves. Right now. I don't think it would be
Yeah,
that
but how do you
hard.
store that? You need to have it on some sort of straw, and those they can't touch each other.
Right. And you were making the point that it's just healthier to get up and go around and move. And not only that, it keeps your mind going because weirdly, you think about every single plant and you go check on every single plant and you remember like what's not doing good, what's doing good. And that inevitably would sharpen your mind. It's like, how they talk about old people do better when they have friends to communicate with and they play Scrabble or whatever. It's the same idea. And plus, there's study after study, not to mention the nutrition benefits, but just being around the greenery lowers your heart rate, blood pressure, and makes you healthier all around.
And if you want to walk barefoot, then you can ground yourself as well in that environment. Right. Like again, if we're going to talk about make humans healthy again, the rubber shoes that you wear do not allow you to connect to the Earth's magnetic field and the grounding effect that you get from the difference in the soil, the magnetism of the soil. That's a huge thing that we need to start walking barefoot. We need to have like a hug a tree, walk barefoot, work in your garden revolution on this planet again.
Except for the hookworms. You got to be careful about that.
There's no hookworms, man. I don't know. See, that's the thing. They brainwash everybody. There's hookworms. If you walk barefoot, you're going to hookworm. I've walked barefoot so much. Years and years of like, we got animals. I got no hookworms.
Yeah, that's only if you're stepping in poop. That's the only time that's going to happen.
Like a normal person would try to step around the poop. Like who would step into animal manure on purpose with bare feet? Like that's the last thing is just like hardwiring you would want to do. Like your hardwiring thing as a human is don't step in the big giant pile of animal excrement with your bare foot. Like go to the left or the right of that. Like,
but it's it helps you ground, right? To nature. No, I'm just kidding. Don't step in the poop. That is weird that we've developed this idea of being connected or disconnected totally from the earth, all the way down to that little thing that you mentioned. We walk around on rubber and we cut the circuit to the whole ecosystem and life of the planet. And especially those people that believe that the earth itself is a life form are getting a little more credence. I saw a paper not too long ago that was postulating that stars are so complicated with the gravity and the elemental mixes that are happening there, the different dynamics, that quite possibly stars are conscious. I know that sounds silly, but that's a real paper that they've put out. And not only that, another paper I read is postulating that consciousness itself comes from quantum entanglement. So that means the further that we're cut off from everything, you're still connected, right, to the whole thing. But I wonder why that is, that we went in the direction of, everything from our clothes to our shoes is like separating us from nature itself. And now the food industry and society is further just pulling us away from anything that's human and natural.
Well, if you were in an invaded planet, that's what you would do.
Invasive.
You got to think about it. An invasive hominid species had taken control at some point in the past. And maybe you could talk more to that. We look at the different kind of hominid species that have come and gone. You have to think about, was the same invasive hominid species force here at that time, but they couldn't control the hominids because they were so much more in tune, or they couldn't really control that, or they had to gene edit it down over successive generations, where the original hominid species here, I don't know, I'm going to throw it out there because you're very versed in this more than I, and I guess I'm looking for a question or maybe an answer on that.
Well, the whole idea of the hominids is being thrown upside down right now. We're finding new ones. And not only that, I think the other day I read a paper that someone was pointing out that they found a Homo erectus in China that's dated at 1 million years ago, which totally throws the whole out of Africa evolution of man theory on its head, because it means hominids were on all the continents, running around, intermixing, competing. And imagine we can't even track down, where the ideas came from. Like, we don't know that farming came from humans. We don't know that tool making came from humans. We just know we learned it and started using it. And we're about at that point again where, I harp on this, but with the addition of the technocratic movement, we're about to see new hominids that would be technically called invasive species. I mean, they wouldn't be the normal human that's been farming and domesticating, let's say 20,000 years, not 10. But that would just totally be replaced in a few generations.
And it has been since World War II, hasn't it? If you think about the Great Generation, then the mind and the iron lock grip on the mind of, we need to stop this madness that's going across the planet. I think at that point, too, they saw it. And, you might want to go a little woo-woo on this, but I do believe even back then, with the electrification of the planet and the radio signal frequency of the planet coming into earnest, and let's say 1915, or maybe, with the formation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. But as you came forward from that point in time, something definitely had taken over the planet. In terms of, we could have gone with magnetic motors and using the Earth's magnetic field to spin magnets in a different direction to make some sort of rod spin, the same thing we do with superheated steam today. They could have got the RPMs above 1200 RPM, easily 1500, 1700 RPMs, just using magnets. Earth's magnetic field power generation, where you don't need to burn a thing. You're using the Earth's magnetic field. You're a kid who play with magnets and spin them. But we went this entirely different direction, where the petrochemical industry, the oil industry, and the electrical industry all kind of evolved at the same time on everything on a metered system. And at that point, too, after World War I, when people came back, the radio, offshore radio had started with Marconi and that sort of thing. But the awareness of the society, there was a absolute explosion of the mind at that time in the 1920s and 30s. Now, I don't know if they found something back then and they came to that point where this needs to stop. And that's why we went to war. In terms of the technological advances at that point had gotten to the crescendo where they understood it was an invasive hominid species versus humanity. And what we consider is the winners, the good guys, perhaps were the invasive hominid species that had beaten the regular humans in the 1940s. Because it's quirky for me that every time in history, when we read history from start to finish, it's always the good guys that win. Who's writing the history? Like, for me, percentage-wise, just being like a numbers person, 100% of something doesn't make sense. It's got to be less than. But it's very difficult for me to believe through history, the way we read it, that 100% of the time, the good guys always prevail and stop the bad people from doing what they were doing. And just, that's an anomaly in itself, history of how many victors rewriting the history is they were always the good ones stopping the bad ones. But I do go back into the Civil War of the United States, the perception management of the Berry Center coming into alignment with the gravitational center in 1861, and then the Civil War starting directly after that. And then where we come into this low solar activity period in, what was that, the centennial minimum in the beginning of the century of 1900. It was like 1897 to like 1910, that solar cycle in that area, incredible low. But there was a very low magnetic field state at that time on our planet. And then suddenly the Federal Reserve comes out of that. We start World War I. And then we're coming in now 100 and some years later into a very low magnetic field state again. And I'm just wondering that, again, I'll ask you, Ransom, to respond to this. Like, my whole perception on this is looking at it saying, perhaps they discovered something of the non-human control system back at that time, and everything that we saw from say 1750 up until 1920 was to battle against that. But for some reason, that invasive hominid species force won over the planet. And everything in that demarcation line of World War II forward has been that hominid species invasion that has set our world to make it the way it is now, because you just described it. We're wearing plastics like recycled bodies. This cotton shirt. I try to wear cotton when I can. I try to walk out barefoot when I can. But you got rubber-soled shoes, GMOs everywhere, Wi-Fi, all kind of electronic signal, everything. This is a completely non-human environment that has been invented and completely veils the entire planet. There's nothing of like original human species here now. This is a planet that has been terraformed, and we exist at this point in time. So who really won at that point? I really believe there was some sort of battle for humanity itself that occurred, and I don't know, I'll leave it there. I know where I'm going with that.
You talking about them aliens that live at Antarctica there? They might have been flying around, because out here in the desert in 1947, they say they crashed. But think about that for a second, because what if the legends of breakaway civilization at that time, right at that same point you're talking about, you know that the main nations of the world merged in a way, in a weird way, where they hired all of the supposed enemies, right? And they integrated them into their science programs. So would you have freaked out more in 1947, 2 years after the war ended, if some human landed in the middle of the desert with an anti-gravitic device? Would you have freaked out more about a human doing that or an alien? Because it seems like people right after the war would have freaked out if they saw an anti-gravitic device flown by a human. And there's, I'm sure you've heard the things of Admiral Byrd, and there's supposed to be battles and all kinds of stuff. But just say that's not what it was, and that was just the beginning of the breakaway. And since then, they've been feeding only technology that is disruptive and destructive and transforming to humans since that point. And then here we are in the future, where everybody's infertile, dying of cancer. We have all these problems, and we're just now getting the representatives to even have a discussion about whether or not some of these things are bad. Like from the fluoride to the food, whatever you pick, you're barely just now getting that discussion. And that tells me they've moved on to new programs that you won't learn about for 20 more years. And then by the time you learn about it, you're already toxified by it. It's over. It's done. It's been introduced. I mean, think about that, especially the plastic part of this. I was watching a guy out on the Sahara go to the beach so he could test the dead seals to see how much plastic they had, because they were worried about the lion populations getting sick, because that's the only, avenue that they would get those microplastics is through food. And they're out there eating seals on the beach and stuff. And just the concept that there are a whole plethora of sciences now that are just studying what we do and how is it going to work out. That's pretty scary. These are topics that you don't see Greta Thunberg talking about. The chemical pollution, the genetic pollution or transformation. You barely hear about deforestation that's getting rid of all of the original plants and animals in certain areas. And then at the same time, you have scientists discussing, should we bring back this animal? Should we transform this animal to change it? Alex Jones might have sounded crazy 20 years ago talking about spider goats, but that protein from the spider genetic creation is found in humans and animals now. So somehow that got distributed across the planet, even though it was only in these little programs. How did that happen?
I don't know. Tell me about the 1940s where describe that in a little more greater detail, where you say that breakaway or those battles for the breakaway society. Like, why did those that had superior technology just disappear and allow another force to run roughshod over humanity right now?
I don't know. Maybe they got the notice from the actual rulers of the earth that this ain't the stage of technology we're ready for you to have yet. Think about Elon Musk is barely, doing some fancy stuff with computers, but we're still on the rocket fuel. We're not talking about anti-gravitic devices or none of that. So even the next civilization that's been created since the 40s seems to have not increased in technology, really, besides maybe the input of algorithms and AI, which are alien in itself.
What they've increased, though, is the input into each individual product that we need. Like, that is a definite thing where the inputs to produce the products is increasing. So there has to be a longer supply chain with companies controlling every single aspect of that, milking profit out of every single step of that. Instead of being direct production, I mean, literally miles from where you consume it, it's now 3,000 mile supply chain, and everybody's getting rich off of that. So until that stops, then we sit in the same world spinning in a circle and kind of like the plastic garbage patch that just spins and dissolves into like a plastic goo in the oceans here. So, will one administration stop all this? Are we at the precipice of the rollout of new technologies? And are those technologies the one we really want? Because I'm a fan of using magnets and Earth's magnetic field to create power. I want something the size of a loaf of bread to produce enough power in my house that I can buy, take it off the shelf, put it in my house, plug it in, and I never need to pay for power again. But some of the plans I'd seen, even though they unveil electrogravitics technologies and power production devices, they're still going to use the same delivery infrastructure. So the power plant itself might go to electrogravitics and using magnets and Earth's magnetic field to produce the power, but that same electron they float back and forth at your house there, you're still going to have to pay for that delivery of it. You're never going to break free of this system. And that's the whole thing I've learned is the plans they have in the future, even though they move to no coal, no oil, no gas burned, Earth's magnetic field, they're still going to charge you for the fee to run a large power plant off of Earth's magnetic field to get you the power to your house. They're not going to create these home devices. It's always going to still be this centralized system, even though they evolve technologies moving forward. And that's the greatest thing for me is I don't understand. Why would you not build a bunch of home units that would last 100 years with material sciences? There's no like planned obsolescence. This thing, like it was in the Greatest Generation. You bought a washer in 1945, washing machine. That thing's going to last until 1995 or 2000. That's a 50-year washing machine. Today's washing machines are what? 5 years, 10 years? You got to get a new one. They break on purpose. But we need our electrical infrastructure to be more robust than that. It can't have an obsolescence date on it for the home units. It needs to run for 100 years in your house.
I think they'll get it there eventually where there is something like that, but it'll be on the please deposit 25 cents and then you'll have to use your digital ID to make the power come back on. It'll be something like that. Think about one of the only ways or only things that we could do to break away from the metering system is this idea of growing our own foods. Unfortunately, you're still going to have to buy supplies depending on where you live, soil, fertilizer, water. For me, it's water here in the desert. I have to pay for water to use it. But this is the way to break away. at least part of it. And this is not only your food, but a big portion of your medical costs in life if you're eating these healthier things. Like, here's a spring gardens list that everybody could get seeds for now in fall and then be ready to rip as soon as spring warms up. It might warm up late this year, though. I'm expecting a really chilly winter.
Well, you are. A lot of people are too. So, seeing even when we were live last week, you were talking about that. And since you have the veggie stuff up there, let me throw a point. Anybody out there, please consider making a food map of your area. And when I say that, once you notice something growing wild in a place, mark it down and make a map of that area. Because even for me, I do crab apples, and I like to get the crab apples for our chickens and ducks and thing. I found a few places where there's wild crab apples growing, but nobody ever harvested it. It all drops on the ground. So for me, I'm making like a food, production map of not only the area we have around here, but of my own land. Like when the nuts come on, because we had the different kind of nut. We had the walnuts here, and the hickory nuts came down, walnuts. It's like where the trees are on the property. So when you can, like, if you have a map, you can actually follow that route around during the different season and know that you're only looking for 2 or 3 things. Like we had the hackberries here. It was the kind of a wild blueberry. Ended up getting a bunch of those to dehydrate as well. And it just depends on which season it is. There's always fruit. We got mulberry trees around at certain times of the year. There's always something. And the pine pollen too, if you're not allergic to the pollen on the pine trees. Like we're the lowest hanging branches in the smaller pine trees, so you can get in and harvest that pollen to use for flowers and different types of things. So, to make a food map seasonality wise of where you live, vegetables in the spring, like all kind of stuff grows wild everywhere, from the hen bit to different types of lettuces and clovers and violets and everything in between. But then, that's going to shift after you get into late spring, and then you get into early summer, and then, what kind of wild forageables are around. And then when you come into the late autumn or the late summer before autumn, there's a huge amount of things that you can harvest, but you need a map so you don't forget it. And it's going to be seasonally and by the month, and you need to start to understand some plants. And in addition to what you can grow, hell, you could take a bunch of those seeds and just throw them out in other places wild, and they'll just start back up again. And then, even if it's not your own land, you can throw it in a vacant lot. Because right now, a lot of homes aren't going to be built. So I'm going to just go out on a limb and say a vacant lot now is going to pretty much stay a vacant lot for the next couple of years, unless you're in these very, like Knoxville's one of them, like build every square inch. We need more money. But a lot of places, when you're there, it's not like that. So. Everybody, please remember civilizationcycle.com. Drop your email in there. We will get the show notes for tonight's talk. Wow. 8 points of the most relevant information so you can start conversations or do your own research, and also buy me a coffee /Civilization Cycle. If you like this type of content, make sure to support us so we can keep going week after week. We have production costs and software costs and these types of things. So, help keep us on air also. Ransom, sign us out.
Thanks for watching. I sent the list from the Farmer's Almanac there, and if you guys noticed, a lot of the summer, fall, and spring plants are the same plants.
Yeah, summer and fall, they do overlap a little bit too, like the kohlrabis and the lettuces and these types of kales and things. When it's cooler, they grow well. When it gets summer, they don't grow so well. When it comes back in autumn, they grow well. So throw those seeds out. Even if they start growing in September, you're still going to get some very limited veg production, at least where I'm in Tennessee, through the winter. Nature's bountiful, man. There's so much. Nature gives you so much more than you can possibly consume. You must share with your friends and family. Ransom, last word.
Peace out. Civilization Cycle every Thursday.